Space, the final frontier. This is the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. Its mission to explore the solar system, to seek out new observations and data, to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. And now the host of the Observer's Notebook, Tim Robertson.
Hello and welcome to episode 95 of the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. I am Tim Robertson, the host of the Observer's Notebook, and also the coordinator of the training program within the ALPO. Thank you for downloading and listening. The Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers collects and analyzes observations of various solar system bodies and associated phenomenon, and publishes detailed reports concerning these bodies in its quarterly publication, the Journal of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers, also known as the Strolling Astronomer. This podcast depends upon donations from you, our listeners, to keep it alive. If you do enjoy what you hear on the podcast, you can donate to it via Patreon by giving it up to as little as $1 a month. If you feel even more generous, for $5, receive early access to the podcast before it goes public. For a monthly donation of $10, you receive a copy of the Novice Observer's Handbook. And for $35 a month, you receive 1 year's membership to the ALPO and producer credits on the podcast. You can help us out by going to patreon.com, that's patreon.com/Observer's Notebook. And if you would like to join the ALPO, membership begins at only $18 a year. For more information, find us at www.alpo-astronomy.org. And you can also find the ALPO on Facebook. Just search for ALPO Astronomy. And yes, the Observer's Notebook also has a Facebook page as well. Just search for Observer's Notebook. And if you enjoy what you hear in the podcast, please subscribe. That way you'll never miss another episode of the Observer's Notebook. And now episode 95. We're going to talk to someone from Celestron, Greg Bragg, about the latest and greatest going on with that company. Hope you enjoy it. All right, I'd like to welcome everybody back to this episode of the Observer's Notebook. We have a special guest today from Celestron, Greg Bragg. Welcome to the podcast, Greg.
Thank you very much, Tim. Glad to be here, man.
Yeah. Now, before we get into it, why don't you just give everybody a little bit of background about yourself?
We have, 3 hours?
We have as much time as you want.
I'm just joking. No, I've spent about, it's close to 15, 16 years now on the manufacturer side in the hobby. I've worked for Meat Instruments until they got in financial trouble and laid a whole bunch of people off back in 2010. I worked for Explore Scientific for 7 years with Scott Robertson, a bunch of my good friends there. I spent a little time in the middle of that, just a little over a year at Pentex, selling sport optics with them and helping them get some eyepieces that they had discontinued a long time ago, brought back. And then got an offer from Celestron back in November, so I've been with them since November of last year.
Oh, okay.
I started selling telescopes in a camera store in the early 80s, 82, 83. And it's funny how this has kind of come full circle, because the guy that kind of trained me worked for Celestron at the time. His name is Joe Gordon. He's an icon in this industry, been in it a long, long time. And Joe showed me through a little Celestron C90 on the hood of a car in a mall parking lot, and kind of got me hooked, So I've been an amateur for a long time, and then, got lucky enough to get involved with the manufacturing side because I've always been in sales, cameras, and telescopes and stuff like that.
All right. Now, where are you located?
I live in Atlanta, based out of my home. I've worked out of my home since the middle 80s.
Nice. So in this virus thing, you haven't had to compensate and start working from home.
It's been status quo, just normal stuff every day. Yeah.
Good. Staying healthy?
Yeah, I do have my wife at home. She works for a church, and she's their office manager, so she's at home. But yeah, nothing really abnormal for me, thank goodness.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
Yeah.
Now, do you consider yourself an amateur astronomer?
Yeah, sure. I own, I don't know, 3 telescopes of my own, 4 telescopes, counting my solar scope. So, yeah, I'm not as hardcore as a lot of guys out there, because the vast majority of my time I was involved in retail and, sales for the manufacturers. So I don't get to spend as much time enjoying the hobby because most of the time I'm working. And as you'll learn through the course of this interview, that I've attended over 100 star parties, and during those events, I don't get to enjoy it as much as the guys that are there spending their time, but I do get to show them our equipment, and at the same time, let them look through our scopes at objects in the night sky. So I don't do it as regularly as I'd like to for fun. Most of the time it's for work.
Okay. Now, was there an event or something that sparked your interest in astronomy originally?
Yeah, that C90 on the hood of a car in a parking lot at the mall, looking at Saturn. I mean, I just was like, okay, I got to learn how to do this and what this is all about. And when I started selling them in retail, I was part of about a 60 or 70 store chain at the time, camera store chain. Mm-hmm. And in short order, I was helping a lot of stores sell more telescopes because I really jumped in with both feet and learned about it, and just figured how much fun it was and enjoyed teaching people how to get involved in it. So
yeah, you can sell anything you have a passion about. That's the thing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I've been blessed that way. I've been involved in photography since I was in high school, and got a job in a camera store and worked with them off and on in the camera industry for 30 plus years. And now I'm doing this for the last 15 or 17. So yeah, it's been a great life.
That's good to hear. Now, do you remember what your first telescope was?
Yeah, I bought a Nexstar 5, SE5. I had, because I worked in a camera store, I had the pick of just about anything I wanted. Right. I wanted something portable, and ended up taking that to a star party for First Light, and realized it wasn't enough aperture pretty fast. Mm-hmm. So I ended up with a 8, and then ended up a Nexstar 8, and then ended up with a LX200 10-inch, which I owned for 15 years.
Great. And
now I have an LX200 12-inch. I have 127 FCD 100 Celestron Explore Scientific refractor, and I have a 120 ED, and I have a 12-inch Dob. So yeah, I'm happy product wise.
You're covered.
I am.
Now,
yes,
what do you like to do? What do you just do visual? Do you astrophotography?
It's really interesting because from my youth, I was involved in photography. And when I got involved in astronomy, I knew that I wanted to do some picture taking, but I saw all these guys at star parties just fretting over it and struggling with it and, beating them up about it. And I just got this nervousness that if I jumped in, I would probably be over the top. I would probably be working so hard at it, I would forget about the joy of it. Right. So I kind of focused on being visual, and I love looking at galaxies. I love looking at globular clusters. I'm into lots of nebulas. I love Orion. I love the Veil. Lots of stuff. I'm really get to enjoy when I'm at star parties, showing people through our equipment. Mm-hmm. And they always ask for the big, beautiful stuff. So I kind of enjoy looking at that myself anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, is there someone that influenced you in astronomy to begin with?
Because I was in this camera store and I had absolutely no idea about it, I would have to say Joe Gordon was, and we became good friends. I eventually became the vice president of purchasing for that company, and Joe called on me years after I had, looked through a telescope with him. And he always was the guy I could reach out to and talk to and ask questions about, and was always open to, helping me learn more about what was going on. So I would call him kind of one of the guys that helped me the most. There's also another guy who you may know. His name's Chuck Pisa. And Chuck was worked in a camera store when I was in the camera manufacturer side selling Olympus cameras. He worked at a camera store in Sarasota, Florida, and he was one of probably the most influential guys from a technical standpoint.
All right. Now, you mentioned star parties, and you said
Yeah.
you've been to over 100.
I have, yeah.
Now, most of those have been as a vendor, or?
Before I became an independent rep for Meade, I had gone to maybe 6, maybe 7.
Okay.
Mostly the Peach State Stargaze, Winter Star Party, and Chiefland Star Party because they're my, locale to me.
Right.
And were easy to get to. And then when I went to work for Meade as an independent rep in 2005, I told them one of the things I really thought would be beneficial to marketing their brand was doing star parties.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a whole bunch around the Southeast, up in Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Florida, and Georgia. I don't think I did any in South Carolina, but about 5 or 6 a year for about 3 years. And then I went to work for Meade and convinced them that I wanted to continue to do that, and started doing the big ones, RTMC.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That was good. That's right.
Pardon me?
RTMC, that's my area. Yeah. And that's why I first met Scott too, Scott Roberts. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I averaged probably for 10 years, I averaged probably 4 or 5, sometimes 6, depending on the year, a year. And then when I went to work for Explore, that was one of, Scott's favorite things to do as well, is star parties. So we started traveling around the country for 4 years, pulling his Airstream in his truck. And we did 40 or 50,000 miles a year and did 6 or 7, sometimes 8 star parties a year. It was unbelievably awesome.
That's crazy. Do you remember your first?
It was the Peach State Stargaze in, I can't remember the name of the city, south of Atlanta, Jackson, Georgia. Okay. And there was about probably 175 or 200 people there. Mm-hmm. And those people were so amazing. I mean, I think that's another reason why I like the star parties and the events that I've been doing, is because the people are just fantastic. You know?
Right.
People are so willing to share, give you their experience, give you their knowledge, give you their optics to play with. I remember the first cool thing at that star party was there was a homemade hydrogen alpha telescope that was basically a piece of aluminum tubing that was about 5 feet long on these really rickety, kind of like sawhorse legs. But it was the first time I'd ever seen the sun in H alpha, and I was at that eyepiece for half a day. I mean, it was unbelievable. But yeah, so that was my first star party. It was a great thing to experience. Really was.
Yeah. Now, do you have a most memorable star party, or would it be the first one?
Well, I think there's been a couple of those memorable ones. I've been able to take both my boys with me to different events. I have a 27-year-old and a 25-year-old, and from the time they were in their 20s, I got to take them to some events. I got to take them to Golden State Star Party in Northern California. I got to take them to Nebraska Star Party. Each one of them in the summer, I would try to find a place where they had time and I could take them with me. And we did probably three star parties each with them. And those were really probably.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. My oldest, when he was 12, when I was still selling telescopes at the camera store, he and I went to a Peach State Stargaze in the northern part of Georgia. And he still talks about it today. So those are very memorable to me for sure.
That's great. Now, with the current environment, what do you think the future of star parties will be?
That's a really good question. And I wish I had the answer. I have convinced Celestron to get back to doing this as well. When I came to work for them, I said, you guys have done a few a year, and you have been, picking, really nice sized star parties. And I think we need to do a little bit more variety. We need to go to some places where there's, less than 200 people, some places where there's 300 or 400 people, some places where there's, 500 or more, and try to spread this out and do, 3 or 4 or 5 even a year if we can. And they've agreed to it. And I had a budget for this year, which started with Winter Star Party to attend 5. And so Winter Star Party is the only one I've been able to do.
So can you roll that budget into next year?
Well, I haven't asked about that, but I'm still waiting to see what we're going to do about the upcoming ones that hopefully will finish this year out. Yeah. I have El Dorado Star Party and what was the other one I was going to do? The Okie-Tex, which is one of my favorite star parties. Those are still on my list of things to do this year. The Peach State and El Dorado overlap each other. And if I have the budget, I'd rather go to El Dorado because I've been to the Peach State so many times.
Now, what is that?
El Dorado is it's a spinoff from Texas Star Party.
Okay.
It's in September and October. My fault,
okay.
October. Right. And it's a small group and mostly astrophotographers. But what I like about it is I've gotten a lot of friends from that event because I've been 5 or 6 times to that event, and I'm usually the only vendor there because it's so small.
Oh, okay.
But I can tell you, when I worked for Explore Scientific, I remember going to that field the first time working for Scott and seeing 2 of our refractors on the field of about 150 people. Over the next 4 or 5 years, because I was there showing my stuff, probably 40 or 50 people ended up with Explore Scientific refractors because they got a chance to look through them while I was there.
That's great.
And ended up doing, imaging with them. And I've sold, everything from 80 millimeters all the way up to, 8-inch, 7-inch, 6.5-inch refractors for those guys. So that's what I think is important about attending those events from the manufacturer side, is because you get to do grassroots, marketing, and especially when you're the only vendor there, you get a lot of attention. So it's beneficial.
Yeah, I remember the old days in the 80s and things at Riverside Telescope Makers Conference. I mean, everybody who was anybody with telescopes as a manufacturer was there.
Absolutely.
And it was crazy. And they bring their factory seconds out, and if you were there early on Thursday morning or Friday morning, you're picking the litter of a lot of good stuff. But
my first real star party as a meet employee was Riverside Telescope Makers, and there was about 3,000 people there. It was in 2007.
Yeah,
and I will never forget that because there were circus tents and lots and lots of manufacturers there. It was a really, really big deal, and I enjoyed the heck out of it.
Yeah, I was there 2000. Yeah, I went for probably 27 straight years. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's unbelievable.
It's no longer there though.
I know.
They shut it down last year, which is really, really sad.
I know. I'm disappointed they had to go away as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So working for Celestron, what is your position?
My official title is Specialty Account Sales Manager. So I kind of take care of the about 200 dealers around the U.S. and Canada. My responsibility is to mostly camera stores, telescope stores, hobby stores that are more interested in the serious amateur astronomer than the beginner. Okay. So, I sell CGMs and CGXs and CGL mounts and Nexstar SEs and AVXs and, bigger Schmidt-Cassegrains and stuff like that because of the more serious amateurs looking for something big aperture-wise. I also sell Skywatcher at the same time.
Okay.
So that is, that's a more serious refractor and Dob manufacturer, and that is primarily my focus. OPT and Woodland Hills and Astronomics and companies like that are my primary dealers. Okay. As almost every rule in business, about 20% of my dealers do about 80% of our business that I'm responsible for. But it's an awful lot of fun. It's allowed me to meet some incredibly great people in this hobby, some incredible people that are involved in reselling the product.
Right.
And I have made some really, really great relationships over the years I've been doing this. So it's fun.
Yeah, I've spent some time over at Woodland Hills, and they're a great group of people over there.
They sure are, yeah. Yeah. My last podcast was with Daniel Muncie, Dr. D, and I hope he posts that sometime next week. So it should be pretty cool there.
Oh, great. So let's talk about some of the products.
Yeah, I don't know if you know about the new product that we just announced back in January. It's not a super serious high-end telescope, but it's really revolutionary. Actually, it's called the StarSense Explorer, and we have 2 versions: an LT, which stands for light, basically, and a DX, which stands for deluxe. And we have 4 different models: 2 LTs and 2 DXs. And those models are really for the beginner, but it's one of the first and only beginner telescopes on the market that uses smartphone technology attached to the telescope that actually allows the user to find objects with a really inexpensive but nice optics, beginner-oriented telescope. It's pretty incredible. It uses StarSense technology that we make an auto alignment system for the next star and the evolution, and it works on other of our telescopes that actually does plate solving of the night sky. So the software on your phone actually sets in a little cradle on the StarSense Explorer. It takes a picture of the night sky, figures out where the telescope is in reference to the eyepiece and the phone that's in the cradle, and then tells the user where the object is. Most beginners get very frustrated when they get a little refractor or a little reflector because they can't find anything but the moon. They don't know how to find objects. And this actually has a night sky tour, so you can, once you do a quick little alignment of the phone and the telescope, it takes a picture of the sky through your phone. It does a plate solve and determines where everything in the sky is, and then gives you a tour. And it even tells you if you're in the city, these are most observable in the city. If you're in darker skies, it says, it even says this is going to be better in dark skies. So you just select an object, a little target pops up on the screen. It gives you an arrow, the direction you move the telescope. You move the telescope until you get a green target. It starts at red, and then as you get closer to it, it turns green. And then it actually, 100% amazing, puts the object right in the green target. All you have to do is look in the eyepiece. The difference between the LT version and the DX version is the DX version has slow motion controls on the mount itself.
Okay.
So if you're doing outreach and you're a serious amateur astronomer and you know all about the night sky, but you are doing outreach on a sidewalk event with your club or something, you could take this telescope out there and show people how simple it is, and in just a few minutes have them finding objects on their own. And then if you've got a group of people, the slow motion controls actually let you stand beside the telescope and keep the object in the target, so people can just flood through the eyepiece one after the other, and you don't even have to go back to the eyepiece because all you have to do is look at the phone and the target and make sure the object's in the eyepiece. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, when you first mentioned this product to me, I obviously went online to look it up, and there's a real nice video showing how this operates. Now, does it work with all cell phones?
It works with everything on the market. We have Android, we have Windows-based, and we have iOS for Apple. Okay. And you can download those for free. The app by itself works on any phone, but it doesn't control the telescope until you actually enter a code into the phone to activate the software to actually do the pointing. Okay. So the software is available. It's been available for a while, but now that we have the StarSense part of it, you activate the code on the phone, and then it connects. It actually allows you to align the scope to the phone. There's no connection. I said connects. There's no actual connection. It sits in the cradle, which is attached to the telescope, which is aligned to coordinate the phone and the telescope together. And that really only takes a couple of minutes. But then once you get that aligned, it takes you right to the object. I did this with a group of guys when I first got my sample. And the most amazing thing to me is if you've used a computerized telescope, if you move it, if you bump it, you have to do a new alignment. Okay. Right. With this telescope, we were looking at Orion and the moon in the south, and Andromeda and the double cluster was in the north and the northeast, which was behind us when we were looking at Orion and the moon. And we turned to look at the double cluster and Andromeda, and they were blocked by trees. So I said, guys, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but I just picked up the telescope and walked to the other side of the yard we were in, set it down. It took 5 seconds. It did a plate solve. The arrows changed. It took me right to the double cluster. I didn't have to do an alignment process.
Really?
It was like the coolest thing. So if you're doing sidewalk astronomy and you've got, this trained on an object, and then you want to look at something else, and it happens to be behind a building or blocked by a tree, you can pick it up and move it, and it gets back into its orientation really fast and lets you look at those objects you couldn't see before because they were obstructed. So it's unbelievable. It's really, really cool.
That's great. Now, there's no polar aligning or anything like that?
Nothing like that. You don't even have to be level. You don't have to. I mean, it's really amazing how it works.
So the possibility of putting motor drives on it really doesn't exist, though, either?
I don't think there's really a reason to do it on a telescope of that capacity. I mean, we do have telescopes that have the ability to add a motor to those that have slow motion controls. And you could do that with the DX version, I'm sure. But only thing it would do then was just track, right? It wouldn't go find it or any of that stuff, but you would find it. And then the motor would help you track it. So I think the big thing that's going to come next, and this is just me thinking out loud because I can't get them to talk to me about what the future looks like for it, but because they know sales guys talk too much, really. But I think the next advantage is for DOBs that are not computer controlled, and we could put this on a 6-inch DOB, an 8-inch DOB, all the way up to a 16-inch DOB. And people could have some really, really nice optics and then be able to find objects pretty easy. You would just have to be able to, move the scope around the track. And that would be the only real negative of adding it to those big scopes. But I think there's a lot of possibilities. The StarSense software and the plate solving capacity is giving us, advantages we haven't had in the past. And I think the opportunities are pretty high for lots of different things, really.
Yeah, I went on Cloudy Night's website and searched for StarSense, and there's a huge thread on this. A lot of people are really excited about it. And I think there's even a guy on there that built a adapter for his DOB.
Yeah, I've actually heard about several people doing that. Unfortunately, I haven't had anybody tell me from firsthand experience if they've been able to make it work. It doesn't seem like it's that hard.
No.
But no one's actually confirmed that it does work. So I can't wait to hear if somebody has made it work.
No, it sounds like exciting technology for someone just getting into the hobby.
Oh, for sure.
It really does. They don't have to do what we did, star hop. Well, actually learn the sky before you start looking for stuff.
Yeah. And that's actually kind of bad for me because, I know the sky pretty well now, but when I first started, I got a computerized telescope. So I was way behind the learning curve on where things were and stuff like that. And I remember this guy with a big DOB next to me when I had my little SE Nexstar SE5. He said, so let's see how good that computer is. And I said, okay. So he said, pick an object. And I said, well, you pick an object because I got the computer. He didn't have any, he had a star map and stuff. Of course, he was experienced and he knew where a lot of objects were. Right. But he picked some NGC object, and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't even know how to get that in my handbox. And he goes, got it, before I even had it in. So that's at NOAA, or that's really cool.
Now you mentioned that your phone images the sky, so there's like a mirror in there.
There's a mirror on the cradle that holds the phone, and it just takes a picture of the star patterns. It actually does save those star patterns on your phone in the back end. You can't actually access them unless you tell the software to keep those for you. But they're just going to be, constellation pictures. Basically, they're not long exposures. They're just picking up the key stars for the alignment and finding of those of objects. So.
Now, is there a magnitude limit that we have to have really clear skies?
Let me tell you, man, and the experiment I did with these 10 guys was in the front yard of a friend of mine's house with the front porch light on, a motion control light over his garage, and it came on every time we moved, and a street light just at the edge of his property, which was, 70 feet across maybe. It wasn't even a big yard. And it had no problem whatsoever finding the objects. Even when I moved it, it took 5 seconds to do a new plate solve. A little instruction on the phone comes up and says, don't move the phone. We're recalibrating the alignment. And then as soon as that was done, the arrows pointed right to the double cluster. I went right to the double cluster. It was right in the center of the eyepiece. So that's just astonishing. Yeah. Now,
what are the optics that the systems come with?
So we have 2 refractors, one for the LT and one for the DX. The LT comes with a 80, millimeter refractor, and the DX comes with a 102 refractor.
Oh my!
And then we have a 114 reflector on the LT and a 130 reflector, both Newtonians, on the DX. So a lot of people that I see, doing reviews and stuff appear to be amateur astronomers that are probably in clubs and have heard about them and want to do some outreach like we're talking about. And most of them have bought the 130 because, they want more aperture. They understand what that does for you. But I got a sample 102, and in that guy's front yard, we could see Andromeda. It wasn't beautifully detailed, but you could obviously tell it was a big galaxy. Mm-hmm. The double cluster was great. The Orion's Nebula, even with like a 10 millimeter eyepiece, was really something else to see for under $400 telescope. So it was pretty awesome. The moon was beautiful regardless, and it's going to be good in just about any telescope you can take in your front yard and find the moon with. But it was, those objects they're big, but they, in the city, when your eyes aren't dilated, they were beautiful. Guys were going, I can see Andromeda in a $400 telescope. Really?
So is that the price point for these? Pretty much about 400?
The LTs are around 180. And the DXs are between 350 and 400, depending on where you buy it. So, yeah.
Okay. And all you need is your cell phone to make it work.
That's it. You got to have a cell phone. Yep. No additional stuff. They don't require power. You don't have to have, if you're going to use your cell phone in cold weather, you probably want to get a little portable battery to carry with you to keep that going. But generally speaking, just grab the scope and the tripod and your phone and go wherever you want to go, man.
That sounds cool. Good little first telescope, or like you said, for star parties.
Yeah.
That you really wouldn't be afraid of kids touching either. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And they can operate it. My neighbor has a 7-year-old little girl, and she's talked about, she's seen me do the telescope in my driveway with the neighbors. And she asked me if she could look through one time. And I said, hey, I got a new one you can try. I actually let her do it. And she went right to the object and found it just like a 20-year-old or older would do. She was so good with it. It was crazy. Huh. She had no problem operating it at all.
But you said like all iPhones, like the iPhone 11, because it's got multiple cameras on there, but it'll work with that?
Yeah, it's not going to have any bearing on the part of the phone. You're going to center the phone over the mirror. There's a little procedure to do that. It takes a minute or two, and you're going to center that up. And then when you're going to want to be able to see the whole mirror with the camera. So that's what you're doing first. Okay. And then you're going to point the scope at an object to like you would do. Aligning your finder scope. It comes with a finder scope as well. Mm-hmm. But like you would do an alignment for your finder scope, you point it at an object and then you zoom in on the phone. You get a crosshair so it can pinpoint the target you see in your eyepiece. So if you're looking at the top of a telephone pole or, something like that down the road, it's a light on a TV, radio antenna or something like that. You're easily able to align the scope in the phone just by matching up crosshairs. And then once you've done that, you just tell get dark and then tell the phone that you're ready you've done an alignment and you want to see the objects, and it brings up that list for you. You just go to town. You can also enter manual information. You can, information that may not be in the database. There's 44,000 objects in the database. So generally you shouldn't have an issue finding something to look at. But the tonight's best comes up and tells you around 30 or 40 objects, depending on whether you're in the city or in dark skies, to get you through a really good evening of observing.
Now, can you enter coordinates?
Sure. Yep. You sure can. Yeah. Wow. So let's say, for example, you wanted to see the ISS. Those are published everywhere, and you can just put in your longitude and latitude, and it can give you the time it's going to rise and set, be illuminated by the sun, and you can put those coordinates in and just point it at that direction. And when when you see the satellite coming, you can get down. Of course, you're going to have to move the telescope to track it, but you can see it. It'll go right through the middle of the eyepiece.
That's wild. Yeah, I was up observing this past weekend, and I wanted to look at Comet Atlas, and my computer-controlled telescope skewed over to where Atlas was, and it was behind a tree. Now, if I could have just picked up my telescope and moved it and just zoomed in. I mean, I wasn't about to pick it up because I had it all aligned and everything. But
when you do alignment, you don't want to move it at all, right?
Yeah, that's wild. That's really wild. Interesting. All right.
It's really doing well too. We started shipping it at the end of January, and it's been brisk. I mean, I'm really satisfied with the marketing we did, the communication we shared with the dealers, how the dealers have embraced it, and for an entry level telescope, I think it's going to be very, very successful for us.
That sounds cool. Yeah, because I'm always asked, what type of telescope under $500 would be a good first telescope, and this sounds like something interesting.
It is.
Good. Now, what do we have on the other side of the spectrum?
Well, we started shipping the new 11-inch Ross telescope. If you don't know what that is a really imaging specific, sort of a Schmidt-Cassegrain design, but the camera goes on the corrector plate instead of back where the eyepiece would go.
What is Rasa?
Rasa is, you caught me where I wasn't thinking. Rowe, Ackerman, and I can't remember it all.
Probably Schmidt.
Yeah. Hang on, I'm cheating. I'm drawing a blank. I feel horrible about this. It's a Rowe, Ackerman, Schmidt astrograph.
There you go. Okay.
So, but we make an 8-inch and we make an 11-inch, and we just modified the 11-inch back at the beginning of the year with a new focuser system. We changed some inner working parts to to sort of reduce the image shift that you get with Schmidt-Cassegrains. And so that's started shipping late January. We're on back order again, but we will have some probably in the next couple of weeks. But that's been very popular for the imager. There's lots of people already with 8-inch and 11-inch ones, showing reviews and stuff on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. The aperture is f2, so You get a big 11-inch scope that is extremely fast. So your exposure times are, under a minute, way under a minute, and you're getting lots of detail, a lot of capturing a lot of data when you use those scopes, and that's probably the most advanced stuff we've had in a long time for. Primarily for the imager. So it's doing really well. And, it's pretty heavy, but it's, lots of mounts on the marketplace. We have CGM, CGX, CGXL, all those support it fine. The 8-inch will work on lots of things, even a $400 or $500 mount and do imaging, because it's, again, fast, and you don't have to have super high accuracy tracking because your images are so short. Your exposure times are so short.
Now, do you sell it just as a tube assembly?
Sure. Yep. It's available. And we call it optical tube assembly. And yep, it's available in that by itself. So if you have a big enough mount and you want to get a big, fast telescope, you're in good shape.
What are we looking at price point for those?
The 8-inch is a couple of grand. The OTA 8-inch is just a little under $2,000 at $1,700. The 11 is about $3,500.
Okay, that's comparable to what you would pay for that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Yeah, and we have 8s pretty regularly. They're in stock pretty heavy, but 11s, because we did this change, we sold the initial shipment real fast. And more are on the way. With the virus and stuff, we had factories shut down for about 4 or 5 weeks. When they got going again, I heard about boats in the Long Beach harbor being delayed for weeks at a time because
they're just sitting out in the water right now. They're not moving.
Yeah. So that is that's hurt us a little bit. Generally, we're in pretty good shape on inventory, but that scope is in pretty high demand. The back order is pretty high. So the 11-inch.
Great. You have any other products you want to talk about?
Oh, well, let's see. We just came out with a really cool new mount for solar observing. It's called the SolarQuest. It's about $400. It holds 11 pounds of equipment. So a 70 and smaller would be, its primary category of telescopes on it, but it uses, it's called HelioPass. And it's a little software system that actually, you can set this telescope mount on the ground and literally turn it on. It levels itself and goes right to the sun. I mean, there's a little camera. It's really the coolest thing. I've demoed it many, many times. I had it at Winter Star Party, and I probably demoed it 25 or 30 times a day.
Really?
Because people are like, what is this? And I'm like, I had a little 60 watt solar scope on it. Mm-hmm. So I'd say, this is the SolarQuest. This is new. It's brand new. We haven't had it. We just started shipping them in January. It was, Winter Star Party was just the next month. And so you just basically turn it on. You don't have to level it. You don't have to do anything to it. You don't have to, there's no hand controller. You don't have to put in the date and the time and your location or any of that stuff. You just turn it on. It levels itself and then searches the sky until it finds the sun. It literally takes a minute and a half. And then I've had it in my driveway for 5 hours, and it's tracked the sun perfectly for 5 straight hours.
Wow.
Yep, you don't have to do a thing. Now, if you put a higher powered eyepiece on it and you want to scroll around on the sun and go from, edge to the center and stuff like that, there is a little joystick on the mount that has up, down, left, and right like you would play a Nintendo game, and allows you to move around the sun's surface if you've got high magnification. And that's the only real controls on the mount. The power button and this little joystick is really all the only controls you have, and really the only controls you need, because it has this camera system along with the software to find the sun for you automatically and stay on it. I was asked by a guy who was going to do a solar eclipse, if the sun disappeared, would it stay on it? And I said, I don't know. So I took mine out in my driveway and I covered the little camera with an index card, and it stayed on it for well over an hour before I decided not to do it anymore.
Wow.
So yeah, I think the camera is there to just basically find the sun, and then the tracking is already set up to do solar rate and keeps it there.
Yeah. When I've done solar observing, sometimes it's difficult to find the sun through the telescope because your aperture is stopped down and you've got this dark filter on it.
Yep. Yeah, it pops up when it's there, but to try to find it, it's really kind of challenging. You're right.
Because when you mentioned you had a solar mount, and I'm like, well, what's the difference? But wow, that sounds pretty interesting. I like that. It is very interesting, yeah. And it's very portable. The mount itself probably doesn't weigh 6 or 7 pounds. Of course, you've got the tripod. The tripod, it doesn't, because we only support 11 pounds, it doesn't have to be huge. But it folds up real nice and compact. I bet it would fit in a small suitcase if you wanted to travel with it. And you could do trips to solar eclipses all over the world and carry it with you, And what's the price on that? About $400. Wow. Yep. It's pretty neat. That's very cool. I like that. I had not heard of that one. Yeah, it's only been on the market since January, like I said, and dealers are starting to stock it now. So you'll if you go on the websites of these dealers, you'll see it's called SolarQuest. Okay. It's a Skywatcher product. Okay. Oh, all right. Yeah, there you go. I don't know if I mentioned that. No. Okay. I don't think I did. Yeah, it's a Skywatcher product. Okay. Yep. So things at Celestron are doing well right now? They're surviving? Yeah, it's pretty surprising how busy it stayed, even with the virus and everything going on. We have a lot of dealers that have had to close their doors because of, the requirements in their cities and states and stuff. And most of the retail stores that I'm in contact with have actually had to close. They're beginning to loosen that, and some are actually beginning to open next week and in the middle of May. So in the next few weeks, they're going to start opening their retail stores up, I think. But business is still brisk. Web, if you've got a good web presence as a dealer, then you're able to still make sales. A lot of stores, even though they've been closed, the employees are allowed to go. They just, in the state of California, they don't let more than 10 in any building. So as long as there's less than 10 people in, our warehouse our whole building is basically closed in California, and most everybody except 9 or 10 people are working our warehouse. We have 2 buildings. Yeah. So everybody's home, but these warehouse guys in the building,
and they're shipping orders like crazy. So it's still been pretty brisk. Yeah,
that's good.
Yep.
Now, with your experience with star parties and being on the sales side of telescopes and optics, what tips would you give somebody who just was starting out in astronomy?
It depends on what you have to ask a lot of questions, in my opinion. I've done a lot of training with retail stores and employees and stuff. And that's a common question that people ask when they go into, want to buy a telescope. But you have to ask them some questions about what they know and what they think their interests are going to be. If they're interested in the night sky and they want to learn where the objects are, I really recommend at least a 6 or an 8-inch Dobsonian for somebody like that. If they can tell me, they have a desire to do that, then I think that's probably a really great place to start for a low amount of money. You can buy an 8-inch Dob for, $400 or $500 easy, but it's not going to have any computerization and stuff like that. If the person says, I don't know anything about it, I don't even know if I could ever begin to fathom learning about the night sky, but I really want to look at stuff. I've seen Hubble images or whatever. I've seen my friend who's got images. The last thing you want to do is ask them if they are if they want to do photography, because they don't understand how hard it is. Right. And if you ask them, they will automatically say, "Oh yeah, I definitely want to take pictures." So don't ask them that question right off, but ask them if they're interested in looking at the objects first. And if they say yeah, then I would recommend a small to medium-sized Schmidt-Cassegrain on a computerized mount. We sell the Nexstar SE8. It's our most popular telescope. It's around $1,200 to $1,400. Occasionally, you can find it on sale for around $1,000, and some people don't want to spend that much money. But that's really kind of where I think the best aperture for the objects is around 6 to 8 inch. So that's kind of how I direct people in that regard. And then if you want to do imaging, I tell you not to think about it until you're comfortable with the night sky, you're comfortable with the kind of objects you like to look at and want to photograph. And then you have to almost kind of start with something different. You can't really do deep sky imaging with a altazimuth oriented mount, which the little Nexstar is. You can do the moon and some planets and stuff like that, but you can't do a whole lot of deep sky stuff because it's just oriented wrong, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're wanting to do imaging, you got to have a reasonably sturdy mount, and you don't want to spend less than $500 to $800 on a mount. You want to spend more than that if you can, and then you want to get into, in my opinion, a Schmidt-Cassegrain for really small objects, deep sky galaxies and double clusters and stuff like that, nebulas. You want to get into a Schmidt-Cassegrain for that. If you want to do, bigger objects, Andromeda and stuff like that, you're going to want to get a medium-sized refractor. So, you just kind of have to ask the customer, the person that's interested, what their intent is, and find out from them really what suits them, because there's so many products on the market and so many variations and all the types of telescopes and all the types of mounts, that if you don't ask enough questions, you're not going to really help that person. You're just going to end up, confusing them and getting them to a point where they're not going to find it that interesting anymore.
That's true.
Yeah.
Now, what about astronomy books? Do you have astronomy books that you've worn the binding out of and that you always go back to?
Yeah, I think the first book, I got to have it right on my shelf behind me. It's called Falling Stars. And this is a book from Mike Reynolds, and it's Meteors and Meteorites. I love Mike Reynolds. God rest his soul.
Yep.
He and I became friends a long time ago when I started at Meade. Scott Roberts introduced me to him. We became really good friends. And I read that book a lot because I'm not a super meteorite guy, but I find them fascinating, and I've seen the deep impact crater in Arizona, and that kind of got me fired up about meteorites and meteors and stuff. And I also have one called The Sky Observer's Guide.
Oh, yeah.
This was published, I don't even know, in the 60s.
Yeah, this little golden book type thing.
Yeah, 1959 was the first published date, and I've had this book. It's called a Gold Guide. Yeah, a Golden Guide.
Yeah.
I've had this book since probably 1984 to 1985. I'm sure is when I got this, and I've read that front to back. The cover's all, it's all rat-tailed and rubbed off.
Yeah, I think it fit in the back pocket too. It's a nice little handbook to carry with you.
Yeah. I've told a lot of people about that book, and I'm sure, it's still in production. You can still find it. So pretty cool.
Good recommendations.
Yep.
Good recommendations. So what do you think about the future of amateur astronomy?
It's weighted heavily now to, at least in the serious amateur area, imaging. I don't know if there's any statistics about it, but I attend so many star parties, I kind of get a feel for, what's happening. The big Dobbs, 24-inch, 18-inch and up was a big wave in the last 5 or 6 or 7 years. I still see some big ones at star parties. I've looked through a 36. I've looked through a 32. I've looked through a 30. I've seen some amazing things with those big apertures. But I think those are the hardcore guys like me that love visual and aren't interested in imaging. And when you have a scope that big, it almost looks like a picture when you look in the iPad, But I think the vast majority of the guys are doing imaging. I've met, some really amazing imagers over the last 15 or so years. And most of them tell me they don't own any eyepieces anymore. And that is, to me, a little disheartening, I love looking at objects. They started this way. They started looking at objects and then got to the point where they felt like they wanted to capture them with an image, with a sensor, and even before that with film. So I think that's probably the vast majority, 65 to 75% are now doing imaging at star parties. And they go on the first day, you don't talk to them because they're setting their rigs up, and it takes all day and most of the night to get them really where they're dialed in. And then you get to talk to them the rest of the week because they're just operating remotely and got their product, all set up to do, a couple of 100 pictures of a particular object, and they're out socializing. So, which is fine. I mean, I love people to talk, but I think the advantage of these new telescopes with the software we develop with phones is going to help bring more people in. Over the last 5 years, I've seen a younger crowd than I have in a long time.
Have you?
I have, and they're in their 30s and 40s, and some even younger. I met a guy in Okie-Tex. He had his 9-year-old son with him, and we just started chatting. I was working for Explore Scientific at the time, and we're just chatting. And I said, "So do you have your own telescope?" He said, "Yeah, Dad gave me his 102." And I said, "You have a 102? Whose is it?" He said, "It's an Explore Scientific." I said, "Wow, and you're using it?" He goes, "Yeah." So what are your favorite objects? He rattled off like 10 or 12 objects. I was like, this is awesome. You are the future of our hobby, man. And I actually got to do an interview with him while I was at that star party. I made him stand in a chair so we'd be at the same height and stuff. It was so much fun. And his name is Brady. I loved him to death. I just thought that if we could get more kids like that, it would be really, really exciting for our hobby for a long time. But I think the younger guys are, trying to figure out a way to find time that somehow was influenced by, somebody like Brady, who was young and their parents got them involved or, showed them through a telescope. And I think with the circumstances around the coronavirus, more parents are doing that with their kids because they need to find things to do.
That's true.
I think that's why our business is still doing okay, is because guys are pulling out older telescopes they haven't used in a while. They're taking their kids out. They're updating their systems. They're buying accessories for what they already own or adding, bigger scopes to what they've been using for a long time. So I think, I'm optimistic. It's a very small industry. If you look at, industries in general, it's a very niche industry, but we're holding our own. So, I think as long as we still keep getting young kids involved and they transition into teenagers and, early 30s, 40s, and get involved in it, we're going to be fine.
That's good, because I keep hearing about the grain of astronomy, and it's like the ALPO. This last week we kicked off a youth section, so we have a whole group put together now just to promote astronomy to scout groups and things like that. So hopefully that'll help us along the way as well.
Yeah, I got my constellation merit badge when I was in the Scouts. I became an Eagle Scout, and that was one of the things I enjoyed the most. And that was I was probably 12 or 13 years old when I had to identify, I think, 20 constellations, if I remember right, to get that badge. So, but that's a great place for kids to get connected to it for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Greg, this has been great. Do you have anything else you want to share about yourself or your experiences with our audience?
I think I've talked out, Tim. Thank you very much. But no, this is fun, and I really appreciate you inviting me and asking me to do it. I'm happy to share with the people that listen to your podcast, and hopefully they get something out of it, and hopefully this helps encourage more people to look at the sky.
Great. And if people have questions, is there a way they can contact you?
Yeah, my email is gbragg, the letter G, Bragg, my last name, at celestron.com.
Fantastic. And I'll add that to the show notes so people can just go there and click on it and send you a note.
Sure. That'd be great, man.
All right, Greg. Well, this has been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Observer's Notebook podcast. I again want to thank our special guest, Greg Bragg from Celestron, for coming on today. We upload a new episode of the Observer's Notebook every few weeks. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. If you do, please rate and review us. I really appreciate it. You can now listen to us on Apple Radio, iHeartRadio, Soundcloud, Spreaker, Google Play, Stitcher, and the Amazon Echo. You can help support the podcast by donating to it via Patreon by giving up to $35 a month, where you receive 1 year's membership to the ALPO and producer credits on the podcast. And with that, I'd like to thank the producers of this podcast, Steve Siedentop and Michael Moyer, for their generous support of the Observer's Notebook. Thank you very much. The link for Patreon, as well as the link for the ALPO, is in the show notes. If you have questions or comments or show suggestions, just give me an email at commentman@commentman.net or contact us on Twitter at ObserversNBPod. Until next time, my hope is you always have clear and steady skies. Thanks for listening, and stay healthy, my friends.